Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you for our first webinar. We first really wanted to thank all the student leaders from around the world that worked tirelessly to get everyone to join this webinar that is going to be incredible. This is an initiative of the Rimon movement, and I am one of the co-founders. You'll get to meet the other co-founder in a minute, but I'll just tell you a little bit more about Rimon. So Rimon is a movement that really aims to reimagine Israel education for students. Through our different educational initiatives, we have created a really unique way to educate students about the complexities of Zionism and the conflict, with all the time really focused on students. It's all about giving a voice to students, all about a really empowering student. And we really believe that when given the proper tools and educational tools that allow students to complexly think about and develop their own narrative on Zionism and the conflict, we can positively impact the future of the Zionist leadership. And so we have different initiatives, different things that you can learn about on our website. But today we're very excited for this webinar, and Jordana will introduce our speakers today. And thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the by clicking on the Q&A, and we'll try to get them all answered.
Hi, so like Ali said, I'm Jordana, and I'm one of the other co-founders of the Rimon movement. Following what Ali said about empowering students, I would like to introduce Gianna Michelson, who will be leading our conversation with Mosab today. Gianna is a past Rimon cohort participant and current Rimon mentor, who is a senior at the University of Connecticut and the president of the APAC club there. We are so excited to have her here with us today. I would also like to introduce and welcome Mosab Hassan Yousef. Thank you so much, Mosab, for being here with us today. Despite being in Asia right now, we know it's really early for you, and we really want to thank you for being here with us. We are so honored to have you and are looking forward to learning from you. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Gianna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jordana and Ellie. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with Mosab today. Everyone's looking forward to it. I want to reiterate how incredible it is to have you here and waking up as early as you are to be here. We all appreciate it. There's people in this call from all over the world. So although we are living in a world of Zoom, this is one of the silver linings. It would probably be difficult to get all of us in the room together in person. So here we are over Zoom. So I'd love to start, Mosab, a little bit about your background. So knowing that your father was a huge figurehead of Hamas, the leader of Hamas in the West Bank, we want to know what it was like to live in your household. So more specifically, what was it like? What was your perception of Israel, of Israelis, and even just Jews in general, before making the decision to become an informant and changing your life in the way that you did?
Hi. Well, first of all, I don't know if it's good morning or good evening. We've got people from everywhere in the world, and I see a really nice number of people. Thank you for having me. It's a bit early for me here, but this is my usual hours, believe it or not. And I want to give you the best of my energy, which usually in the morning. Yeah, speaking of where I grew up and my people's expectations of me, which happened to be very disappointing to my parents, unfortunately. You know, they wanted me to hate Israel, and Palestinians in general blame Israel for all their problems. It's not a secret. And as a child, you know, the politicians and the religious authorities and all of the forces of the Palestinian societies point the finger at Israel. You know, this is where we blame all our problems. So this is the Palestinian conditioning. You know, it's an ancient method of denying the truth. But I choose different path for life. I see Israel for what it is, just another people, another nation. And they're definitely not responsible for the Palestinian suffering. You know, I cannot like say everything about my childhood, you know. It's I just recall the things that come to mind in the moment.
No, that's already very helpful. Thank you. So you talked about the idea of the denial in the Palestinian condition. So what made you kind of notice that at first? Like, was there a certain turning point for you that made you, first of all, notice like the flaws in the way that they were thinking? And what kind of drove you to make the switch you did in your life?
You know, nothing special about me. You know, I'm just another man. Many people actually know the truth. You know, Palestinians see Israel. They work in Israel. They know Israeli people. They know Jewish people. And they see a nation that wants to live. You know, they see infrastructure. They see education. They see women rights, human rights. They see a democracy, and they cannot hide that they appreciate that model, but they are afraid to say it, you know, and to go against the flow of any society, especially Arabian society. It's a very destructive force, you know, and even someone to go against their own family is a very challenging thing. Not to mention, you know, going against extremists and nationalism and religion, one of the biggest religions in the world. So people choose to stay in their comfort. Somehow I choose to be in the unknown, and I'm not afraid of getting out of my comfort zone. It's everyday challenge, I have to say, you know, that every day I have to make a choice. Do I stay comfortable or do I explore more and transcend my boundaries? It's everyday challenge. And this is how I was since I was a child. I cannot explain why, you know. Is it curiosity? Is it maybe I'm a crazy man? I don't know.
Probably not. That's an incredible notion. I think that's something we all want to see in ourselves as well, the idea of kind of breaking free of things that we're used to. So was it hard at first to trust Israel? Because you mentioned that you grew up knowing that Israel, or believing that Israel was the enemy, and then you decided to make this switch. So was that difficult at first for you to kind of undo everything that you were taught and then work with the other side?
You know, to establish trust, this takes time, you know. If you're referring to the Israeli intelligence, then this takes lots of time. And even all the time in the world, you know, this type of organization, it's in the square of doubt. It's not in the square of faith. You know, the entire intelligence business is constructed on the foundations of doubt, not belief. So they're not going to make exceptions in my case, you know. But a human relation within the organization was developed for sure, you know, was developed, and it took some time to establish that trust. It's not easy, you know, it's not easy. It wasn't easy for them. It wasn't easy for me. It's still not easy for some of your audience, actually. It looks like, is this man sincere? You know, is he telling the truth or not? And there will always be doubt. But trust, you know, it doesn't happen like for you now to trust me and have me on your program. It didn't happen just because, you know, you heard about me yesterday. You know, there has to be some credibility and credentials and all type of things, you know, that validates a person, you know, and especially their actions. It really doesn't matter. It's in the past. What happened, happened. It just punch of memories right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. I think a lot of us would wonder what we would do in situations. So once it was started, I'd love you to give us a little overview about some of your proudest accomplishments, some of the highlights of what you did as an informant with the Shin Bet for those of us that aren't as familiar with your story, just so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah. You know, it's nothing to actually to talk about, you know, because this is not just one-man mission, you know. The nature of the mission that we had required many forces, many people who were in the field, and it's a joint operation. And the goal was basically to stop the madness, you know, man madness, you know, by the name of religion and politics, you know, people killing innocent people, you know, by the name of religion and by the name of nationalism. Bullshit, you know. But of course, it is very hard to go into a mob, into a crowd and say, hey, what the hell are you doing? You know, they will kill you immediately, you know. Many people were crucified, you know, in our town square to go against the mentality of the mob. I had to be quiet about it, you know, and I had to do the best within my ability to just find out a suicide bomber before they reach their target, you know. And I wasn't sure, you know, because it was a very dangerous mission. If I get caught, or if I got caught, I would be killed, no hesitation. So very dangerous mission. And basically you're fighting for people you don't know. And you're fighting for people who are not going to come back and say thank you. You know, there was no reward. I didn't think at that time, you know, I would be talking about those events to you. But the truth is, I did it mostly for myself, you know, for my own consciousness and for my conscious evolution, because I knew that I was transcending all the boundaries, you know, of nationalism, of religion, of parent expectations, of what's agreeable, you know. And this is where, you know, I tested myself, you know. It's like, how far can I go, you know, by like literally defending people who don't even know about my existence. And I might get killed in the process and nobody would even ever know and say thank you. And I had to take the risk, not expecting any reward. But if you know, you know, and this is what really matters, you know. What's the point of the entire world, you know, praising you as a hero if you know otherwise? For me, it really didn't matter, you know, if I get caught, if I would be committing a treason or labeled as a traitor or all these human definitions that really didn't matter. For me, I did what was needed to be done, you know. I was in the leadership circles and all I saw corruption and a bunch of losers, ugly people, you know, leading a nation from a bad situation to a worse situation. And I acted, you know, I acted on my own and I did the best within my ability. It really doesn't matter, you know, what actually we did and how we did it. It's the principle of someone doing what they thought right, using their intelligence, not their education, you know. And looking back at that young man in Ramallah, you know, the projection of my past, what a poor man, you know. It's like really I had no clue what to do, you know, what to do next, you know. It was very difficult, bunch of difficult choices, let's put it that way.
I can imagine. I think you were in the face of such high stakes and such high consequences for your actions. If you were to be caught, you mentioned, you would be definitely sentenced to death very easily. So what was it that gave you the strength to kind of keep going? Were there people around you that you worked with on the Shin Bet side that helped kind of give you that strength, or did that mostly come from yourself? Was it a little bit of both? What was it that drove you to keep going in the face of such high stakes?
You know, of course, the agency would give you all type of support, you know, on such a mission, to comfort you, to give you some security. And of course, there are special forces, there are all type of armies on the ground and stuff. So you feel safe to a certain degree, you know, on a mission, but you know that you are alone. So somehow you need to reconcile, you know, a person in such a situation need to create a purpose somehow, like maybe an imaginary God, you know, I don't know, whatever, you know, moral compass to like at least keep you sane in such a mad world. So, you know, I personally asked myself the question, how can I go wrong by saving a human life? You know? And as you know, as many people know, and even those who don't want to accept the truth, that suicide bombers targeted all type of people, innocent people, you know, children, women, elderlies, doctors, lawyers, students. The suicide bomber, when they got on the bus, you know, they did not ask, oh, show me your ID, you know, your ethnicity, you know, they just blow themselves up. They killed even Arabs, Muslims, Americans, at the Hebrew University, all type of people were killed. Who targets a university? You know, this is madness. So practically, I asked myself the question, what I was doing, if I stop a suicide bomber from reaching their target, I save a human life. And there was no way in the world that I could go wrong by saving a human life. Following a political dogma and a political ideology, there was a chance that I would be wrong, you know, just to follow the lead of my father and his religion and his political ideas. And today I'm certain that he is going against evolution, and he's going against existence, and he's going against nature, and he's going against intelligence, and he's going against the humanity. What defines us as human beings, and that we feel, you know, and we see ourselves and the other. So with that said, at that time, the best I could do just to focus on that saving a human life is a righteous thing. And even though it's going against agreeable, it's going against national agendas and what the crowd expected from me to do.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So at some point you did have to decide to end your work with the Shin Bet and go public and kind of with your involvement with the Shin Bet. So at what point do you think you decided to make that decision? Was there something that fueled it? Like, where did that come from?
You know, this is not just a decision, you know, it's an evolution, you know, and as I told you, it's a relationship. You establish that, you know, and you build it slowly. And I am still building it until today, you know. I overcome so many challenges of building bridges between me and the Jewish people, which is incredible, in my opinion, you know, for my own satisfaction, you know, has nothing to do with bringing peace to the Middle East. You know, I cannot force peace on the world. I can show a model, an example. Maybe it will be remembered long after I'm dead. You know, I don't care. But for me to see the miracle happening, you know, that is actually you and I right now, we're communicating, you know, in a great understanding and without barrier. knew the many Jewish mothers who lost their children to terrorism, and the people who have very hard time to trust. You know, all of a sudden I see them trusting and tearing up, and suddenly, you know, all the barriers are melting down. You know, this is the truth that I got to witness, and this is the truth that I'm not able to actually make my parents see, or the Palestinian people to see. That at the end of the day, there is no such a thing as Israel. You know, there are people, you know, they're children, they're women, they're amazing people. And if the Palestinians start seeing, you know, without the conditioning and without the political ideas, they would just see a projection of themselves, you know. So that said, it's an evolution, and it continues. You know, it's not over yet. And for those who choose to see God, for those who choose to see truth, they need to get out of their box. You know, they need to transcend their boundaries, and then the magic start happening. You know, and here we are, and who knows about tomorrow.
That is true. So I guess that notion about tomorrow, is there any fear you have right now? You're in Asia, you're pretty far away from Israel, from Palestine. So are you afraid right now? Do you feel pretty secure and pretty safe where you're at? What is it like right now?
Oh, didn't you see me? I look very terrified, don't I? You know, there is no reason to be scared. You know, if we know who we are, you know, and excuse me, it's getting louder because we've got very heavy rain right now. So
I can still hear you.
I hope you can hear me. Um, fear is one of the greatest enemies, you know, and for those who choose to take a risk and get out of the comfort zone, face the world, face life, and accept, you know, whatever life brings. You know, we just take it bravely, you know, and take responsibility for our own choices. Then there is no reason to be afraid. You know, I made the choices that I made that brought me here today. So why would I be afraid of the choices that I made? I take responsibility, whatever is going to bring. You know, will I be crucified? Let it be. You know, I will not be the first person to be crucified by a crazy, angry crowd living in darkness. You know, so with that said, I'm not afraid of the choices that I made. I also not proud. It just, I am me, and I take responsibility. Simple as that. And by the way, if you take responsibility, there is no reason to be afraid for nothing.
You make it sound so simple. Wow. I mean, if you say so. I think it's still very brave. I think we all can agree with that. It's definitely a very brave thing that I'd hope all of us are capable of as well, but you do make it sound very easy. So looking forward, on the same note of kind of looking forward into not just your life, but about the greater picture of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You've had an intimate look at both sides. You grew up on the Hamas side with your father being the leader that he is, and then had a very intimate look about with the highest ranking Israeli officers in Shin Bet. So after that experience, both of those experiences on each side, do you have any kind of insight or hope for resolution to the conflict? Do you see this happening anytime soon? And if not, what are the barriers preventing that from happening, in your opinion? I know you're just one person, but you have had a very unique experience. So I think a lot of us would like to know what your thoughts are about that.
You mean if I have a solution for the human condition? There will always Middle East, as long as there is delusion, and as long as there is anger and hatred and lust for power. So this is a human condition, and people project, of course, their very fundamental problems on, like in a form of politics, like on a individual, organization, nation. We tend to live in denial, so nobody wants to take responsibility. It says like, I am the legitimate creator of my reality and I take responsibility for it. So rather than saying this, we blame it on Satan and on the devil, on a government, on a president, so this is life, this is the play. And without the right to dream, so humanity has to dream, and dreaming by itself is it rational? Is it realistic? But this is the essence of creation. So people have the right to dream, and some dreams are realistic, some of them are not realistic, some of them get manifested, some of them don't. And in this diversity of creation, of life, and all these opposing forces coming together at play, infinite, forces, there will always be chaos. It's not going to be like 100% order, it's somewhere between chaos and order. If it was 100% order, we would be just like machines, and then we lost soul. But like a little bit chaos is essential to actually help us transcend the barriers that we create. We call it order, we call it right, we call it wrong, whatever it is. So anyway, I see today, looking back, that my dream about 20 years ago was impossible to achieve. It's like, and a mob would crucify me in the city center, for doing so. But today I see that it's become an accepted truth. I see Arab Gulf countries coming to sit down on the table and realize that Israel is not the enemy. 20 years ago, that was impossible. The same people who come in to realize that Israel is their friend used to give my father's organization money to destroy Israel. So this is a radical change, in my opinion. And this is going to, this is already a new era, but takes time. And to actually see greater fruits. But keep in mind, peace is a choice. Even if we were in the midst of a war and a person choose to be peaceful, they will be peaceful. So I made peace internally, in my conscious, the Jewish people are not my enemies anymore. And that was a long time ago, and I loved unconditionally, regardless of all the stupid ideas inherited, from the other, from the outside. Okay, so I really don't care if there is war or there is no war. For me, I made my peace. It's finished. So to expect from every human being to love the Jewish people or to love the Palestinian people, it's impossibility. Cannot. There will always be enemies. There will always be Nazis. There will always be people who hate. And this form of ignorance is basically a part of man's evolution. Sorry for the long answer, but I'm afraid that we cannot change the human condition, because if we change the human condition, then creation might stop. It's the other side of the coin, and we'll have to accept, that people will dream, and sometimes they're going to have nightmares and create nightmares. We transcend the human condition, but we don't change it. We just transcend it.
Absolutely. That's really an incredible take on the idea of the conflict. And you are talking about how this is part of human condition. This is not really a changeable aspect of what it's like to be a person. But do you think that the leadership on either side has a more, I guess, like distinct role, a more important role in kind of reshaping this narrative? And especially on the Palestinian side, we know that Abu Mazar is not getting any younger. His time will likely end very soon in leadership. So do you think that there is hope for the Palestinian leadership there that can kind of both navigate relationship with Israel and also in the face of this new era of normalization deals with UAE, Bahrain, etc. So what do you see, what's your perception of the Palestinian leadership as it stands and as it is going to move forward?
You know, the Palestinian leadership, unfortunately, has been the predator, actually. And you might see this as extreme, extreme view of that reality. But I don't think that they really care for the Palestinian people, and they exist only with conflict. If there is no conflict, they fear that they won't exist anymore. And this is why they want the conflict to continue. Yeah. It's a mind trick, old game. So right now, I think it's not up to them. We're not under their mercy anymore, waiting for them to change their mind and change their attitude towards this reality. Now, bigger players are coming to the picture, and those players are real players. They're the ones with the money, with the power. They weigh globally. When we talk about Arab Gulf countries, those are not just countries. They are heavy globally. And if they come and they say peace with Israel now, means peace with Israel now. This is the difference. Before, everybody was waiting for the Palestinian Authority or for the Palestinian, what's so-called Palestinian leadership, self-proclaimed leaders, to simply open the door for peace with Israel, so everyone else would follow their lead. But right now, this is not what's on the table. Right now, they see that the train is that they missed the train, and they're like running now behind. So they need to choose. They need to choose. And their intimidation of sending a couple of thousand children to die, they know it's a dead end. It's not going to work. So it's either they accept the new reality, or they will be kicked out. There are alternatives to that. Like, for example, I imagine, and this is one of my dreams, if the Palestinian Authority don't want to take responsibility, I think the holy site of the Muslims, Temple Mount, should be given to Saudi Arabia to rule. For example, this would be like so scary for the Palestinian Authority, that Saudi Arabia, here, if you make peace with Israel, how about building a Jewish temple also? Let all Abrahamic religions worship together, and it's a new era. Saudi Arabia does not see in Israel as an enemy today, okay? And there are negotiations, there are talks. Let the Muslims, by the way, the Palestinian Authority, with their stubborn mentality, they are preventing millions, tens of millions of Muslim pilgrims to come and worship on Temple Mount, their holy sites, and Al-Aqsa Mosque, and bring money to the country and build bridges with the Muslim world. So if the Palestinian Authority is cut out of this, countries can invest, build industrial zones, can have a mandate over the holy sites, and open the door for non-Muslim worshippers to worship freely and equally. The Palestinian Authority right now really need to think and to realize the gravity of the situation. It's too late for stupidity right now. So this is good news. It's what's new, but the transition is going to take some time, for a new leadership. Mahmoud Abbas is not going to stay there forever. And let me tell you something, for the Palestinian, also any new leadership, and I hope that this is also become an accepted reality. I think of the Palestinian situation as a state within a state. There is no room. Both of us know the region. It's very small from east to west. You can cross the country in 40 minutes. So it's a small belt. There is no room, to put two elephants in that room. Like one elephant in the room is enough. I don't know if this is like the right analogy, but like this is the situation. So my opinion, it should be a state within a state. Something like the Vatican. The Vatican is one of the most powerful countries in the world, one of the richest. They own so many properties around the globe, and Palestinian Authority can simply maintain and manage the holy sites, and this will give them tremendous amount of money, tremendous amount of power. Just act like the Vatican. They don't need to build borders within borders. This is total stupidity. We're in the 21st century. We're not talking about imaginary political borders to put like more. We need actually to remove those. We need a region without borders. This is the future. This is, I think, the reality that we should create for the new generation, Jewish and Arab children. So with that said, to end this chaos, a state within a state, something like the Vatican, no borders, take care of the holy sites, but in the meantime, allow the Jewish people also to have free access to Temple Mount and worship, the way they choose to worship. And I think if the Palestinians get to this level of maturity, of understanding, then this would be a great establishment for peace. Do I see Mahmoud Abbas doing this? How could they do it when they are selfish? They're very selfish. They're blinded by their desire and political ambition. But my hope that there would be a new leadership, if this one does not agree to this.
Thank you so much for answering that question. That's an incredible insight, and it's awesome to hear your perspective on it, having such an intimate relationship with both sides. So next, I want to transition to answering some questions from the Q&A, from the chat. So I want to remind everyone here, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box on the bottom bar. You will see it. And Ellie is helping me go through them so I can ask some of them while I'm listening as well. But I want to start off with one from Monica Sager. I hope I'm not pronouncing your name completely wrong. The question is, how do you suggest that we combat the falsifications of Israel that follow Hamas ideals on college campuses in the US? So a lot of us are college students and dealing with a lot of kind of, I guess, conflict between pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian students and dealing with that. So I guess the question relates back to that and is really relevant to a lot of us.
Just I think most importantly to stay truthful and stay true. What Israel stands for, Israel not only as a country, as a nation, is a beautiful thing, and such a beautiful nation, and the Jewish and Israel contribution to life on all levels is tremendous. And for those who know, cannot deny, in the meantime, there are going to be angry people, jealous people, ignorant people, all type of stupidity, you know. And they're going to say things about Israel. And I think we should not panic about that, you know. The truth will always prevail, you know. And Arabs, Hamas, like Hamas, such an ugly reality, you know. They can lie to the world for a year, maybe for 10 years, for 20 years, but you know, eventually the world is going to know that they're Nazis, you know, and eventually, because Hamas pose as a victim, and they're not a victim, you know. Hamas is an ugly organization, you know. They are racists, they are torturers, they are killers, they are criminals, and they are responsible for the death of many, many people. So now, of course, they can come and fish in a muddy water and accuse Israel and blame Israel, and a bunch of ignorant people in the West and in the East will believe their narrative. But for how long, you know? And by the way, for you, like as a young generation, you need to get used to it. You know, just stay truthful, you know. And it's not about other people's opinions of you, you know, or your country, or what you stand for. You know, look at me, you know. If I to go by, like, you know, how many people are against me, I would just die, you know. I would be finished long time ago, you know. But who cares? You know, we just stay truthful, you know, and we do the best within our ability, but not trying too hard also, you know. I don't see, it's like for example, the American campuses, you know, people are not stupid, you know. People know what a terrorist is, you know, and people know what happened September 11th. And every day there is terror, like every now and then there are terrorist attacks, and people know, you know. Maybe political correctness and hypocrisy, and sometimes it bugs me also, you know. It's like, you know, how could you be so blinded, you know, of like, how could you compare Israel to a terrorist organization, or even blame Israel, you know? But people will always find a reason to blame Israel, to blame somebody, you know. And again, this is life. You just keep shining your light, you know, and this is what really matters.
So another question, this is from an anonymous participant, kind of relating back to what we were just talking about, but a lot of times one of the common tropes is that Israelis are killing innocent Palestinians on the Gaza border. So the question is, what would you say to this? Is there any truth to this? How would you respond? I know you're talking about finding your truth. So what is your take on this question?
You know, Israel has the right to defend its borders, has the right to defend its people. And yes, there is an army with guns, you know, because the Israeli Gazan border is a hot zone. You know, we're talking about a war zone where there are tunnels, where there are suicide attempts, where there are people with guns, with missiles, with explosives. So in this type of area, any democracy would deploy its army. It's natural. And the civilians should stay out of that zone. So now the Hamas people want the civilians to go into this dangerous area, because when civilians die, this is how they profit, You know, when children die, this is how they keep going, you know, by creating this and that Israel is a predator. Well, don't send the children to begin with, you know, but they want to send the children. This is their mechanism, you know. Well, how come Israel is not sending the children to the Gaza border to die, you know? So basically, it is dangerous, and war is ugly, and people die in war. What we expecting, you know, launching missiles from schools and mosques, and using children and women as human shields. Then somebody come and say Israel is killing children. Well, how about we see it's like how that came about, you know, and Hamas uses children and innocent civilians as human shields. This is the origin of the problem. You know, I cannot blame the police officer. I cannot blame the border officer, you know, who's basically defending their democracy, you know, which happens to be a democracy that has Arabs and Muslims in it. So my version of truth.
Thank you so much for answering that. So the next question kind of goes back to your roots in your life in the Hamas side of things. So this question is from Ariel Hana asking about recruitment to organizations like Hamas. There's another question also before, somewhere in the chat, I'm sorry I lost it, but about how your father got involved. So if you could speak to a little bit about your own family's experience getting involved with Hamas. Maybe that was a generational thing, but if there's any kind of story behind that, and just in general, how Hamas goes about recruiting people to join their ranks.
So my father is one of the 7 founders of Hamas movement, 7 original founders of Hamas back in 1986, 1987. And he's a spiritual leader of the movement. He was sent to exile to South Lebanon, and he spent many years in Israeli prisons, which basically this is where Hamas grow and rebuild itself in prison. And he has been a leader of the prison movement for many years, where actual Hamas leadership actually stays. So this is like, in principle, my family's involvement is my father's involvement, you know. How that works, how they recruit, you know, there are always people motivated by ideologies and motivated by hatred, and they want to hate someone, they want to kill someone, I don't know. So they join this type of movements, blinded by hatred, blinded by rage, and Hamas thrive in such environment, you know. So this is where, you know, Hamas got its popularity. Hamas is about 35-year-old organization, but before that it was the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's not a new organization, you know, it's extension of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. It's a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a spider web. If someone is cut into that web, it's very hard for them to get out. And like somebody like my father, you know, he sees how Hamas became a monster, you know, but for him it looks like he does not have the power over the movement anymore. He does not have authority over the movement, you know, and a whole new generation took over right now, and he's just a symbol of the movement, you know. So it's very hard for him to choose to die politically, you know, to crucify his ego and say, you know, this is not where I started, you know, and this is going nowhere. At least, you know, he could say, you know, if he was brave enough, he could say, we are going nowhere with this, you know, just suicidal, and it's not working, and just more people dying after 35 years of experiment. You know, an intelligent person should come to a realization, say, you know, this is madness. But instead, he's in denial, you know, he's digging deeper in his hole. So this is my father's involvement, and this is the other Hamas leaderships, and this is darkness.
Wow. So speaking of your father, have you been able to speak to him at all since you came out and announced your collaboration with the Shin Bet and the rest of your family? Do you have any communication with them or with friends? This keeps coming up in the chat, so I'd love if you could answer that as well.
Speak about what?
About your relationship with your father, if there is any right now, with the rest of your family and your friends, or is that that's
obviously there is no relationship. But even if there was, what are we gonna speak about? You know, to talk about what? To tell him how wonderful Israel is. You know, if he's not able to see it, you know, how can I make him see it? He made a decision, and to keep his public image and to sacrifice his son about 10 years ago, and that's fine. It's his right. This is just another example of how blinded we can be as human beings. You know, that we choose our public image, like over our own blood. You know, for me, I did not choose because of politics. You know, I did not choose political and religious dogma over my father's dogma. You know, I choose the simple truth of humanity, of evolution, of that killing is a dead end and violence is a dead end. You know, especially when it's motivated by politics, you know, as a mean to achieve political goals. So this is the very definition of terrorism. So, but for my father, you know, he saw that I embarrassed him and I brought shame on the family, and in order for him to get going in his own society and to protect the rest of the family, he shunned me, and it's okay, you know, it's his choice. And actually, I gave him the authority in our last conversation about 10, 12 years ago. I told him, go ahead. You know, this is what I did. It's coming out in a book. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm revealing myself. And if you want to disown me, disown me. And in fact, he told me, I will never do that. He told me, you will always be my son. You know, this was his last promise that he gave me. And a couple of days later, I hear from the news that he disowned me. But it's all good, you know, for me, who is my father at the end of the day, you know, and who is my family? You know, this is a very important question, you know. Of course, there is a connection, and the connection is not only by phone calls. You know, I feel their struggle. It's not easy reality, you know, for someone to be living in fear and in darkness, you know, totally blinded by politics, and choose to stay in darkness because he's afraid to lose something. He's afraid to lose his public image. He's afraid to let go of his ego, you know. Every day I die and I crucify the sense of of ego. This is how I grow. If I don't leash my ego on daily basis, you know, and just bind it, it grows on me. Then I will be working for people and trying to please people. But for me, what really matters is my own equilibrium, my own balance. Everything outside can be as chaotic as it is. Will I tell him this? I tell him now, but will he be able to understand? Cannot. There is no language. Human language cannot convey such truth. You know, my truth I earned by long experience, you know, in so many stations of life, you know, and that's way beyond Hamas, and this is way beyond democracy. So with that said, there is nothing to talk about. And I don't know how to help him. I really don't.
So I think you've done a lot on your side as it is, so appreciate that. So the next question I want to ask is from David. The question is about Israeli prison. So I know you spent a lot of time there. I think it was 27 months. Is that a breeding ground for radicalization? That's where you mentioned a lot of people kind of get recruited to the movement. So what can be done to combat this if that is the case?
Do you mind please repeating the question? I did not understand.
Absolutely. So the question is about Israeli prisons. So are these prisons a breeding ground for radicalization into movements like Hamas? And if that is the case, what can be done to combat this?
I don't think, you know, that there is a way to solve this problem. Israel has tried very hard, you know, for example, if the most dangerous terrorists, they put them in isolation. So they are not in direct relation with the other or like less dangerous prisoners. But this is like a rabbit hole, you know. Then you will end up building a prison for every prisoner, you know, and this still cannot solve the problem. Eradicating Hamas is not only in prison, it's also outside prison. It's and it's already happening, you know. It's happening by the means of force and by the means of logic. I am doing part of it, and the soldiers with the guns right now doing part of it. You are doing part of it in a peaceful way or other means. All options are available to eradicate, you know, terrorist organizations. And this is not just a Hamas organization, it's a global effort in human consciousness, you know, to counter, to eradicate. And I would say jihadists and terrorists are basically bankrupted, you know. This is another thing to for you guys to see, that after the rise of ISIS, you know, believe or not, such an ugly organization served humanity somehow, because the Islamic Khilafah was a big dream for the Muslims, and everybody is waiting for, you know, where is this establishment of an Islamic state? And eventually, you know, the dream, such a dangerous dream, was manifested in ISIS. And the Muslim world saw its manifestation, and they did not like it, you know. And the Muslim world, and this is where actually, you know, we need to see the change, because this what will cut the energy lines that are feeding terrorists and jihadists, you know, not just by dealing with a terrorist at the point of the gun, you know, but actually cutting the sources. And today, I tell you something, the Muslim world, which, you know, the majority are not terrorists. You know, terrorists are just a small minority, even though the majority supported this minority people for a long time, but now the support is less than ever. And the support from the Muslim world is less, because people, Arabs, Muslims, are sick and tired of seeing masked men carrying guns, intimidating, to kill, to destroy. Enough of this bullshit. You know, people are tired of it. It's disgusting. And this is where, you know, Hamas, you know, for many years they managed to actually sell political ideas to the world, you know, by the name of nationalism. Then ISIS came to the picture, and people are not seeing that they are no different, you know, and this is already happening. And terrorist organization like Hamas is bankrupted. It's very hard for them to sell their ideas. They know that they are cornered, and they are contained to a great degree, you know. So not only in prison, they actually they are in prison, you know, and eventually they will be even contained more and more, you know, as we progress as collective consciousness, to say no, you know, to say no to violence, yeah, to say no to terrorists.
That statement itself gives us a lot of hope to the future. I want to ask, do you have time for 2 more questions? I don't want to, I know it's very early for you over there.
Sure.
Okay, great. And feel free to take as long or as short a time as you need to answer them. So first, I want to circle back to the future of Palestinian politics. So knowing that Abu Mazer is not going to be there forever, do you have any guesses about who's going to take over after him? Will there be an election? Are there any leaders that stand out to you that might kind of take the reins? Will Hamas have a larger role?
You mean in Gaza or in the West Bank?
West Bank.
West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, first of all, Mahmoud Abbas is an old man. You know, when I met him, what was it? 2006. That's almost no, 2006. Okay, well, this is like about, what is it now? 15 years ago, like almost 14, 15 years ago. The man was dying. I'm really surprised that he's still surviving it, you know. His doctors are doing a very good job. So I cannot believe that he's still around, you know. And of course, it's about time, you know, and those people stay in office and in politics for eternity, you know. This is the problem of such rotten system, you know. They call it revolution. It's the most corrupt revolution in human history, you know. And it's a matter of time, you know. If change is not going to happen today, it will happen tomorrow by natural means, you know. He's not gonna stay there forever, you know. Death will take him eventually, you know. But as I told you, what really matters right now is the new reality on the ground, you know, that the Arab Gulf money that was coming to him, the American money, the American taxpayer money that was going to the Palestinian Authority, and many other resources are drying out, simply. And this is going to make a big change. You know, it took decades for the Arab world countries to realize, you know, that enough of this, you know, enough of this. Yeah, all this money, you know, whether Mahmoud Abbas will like it or not. Like today, for example, I say Israel has deal with Arab Gulf countries. Let them invite them to come to the West Bank, what we call the West Bank, and create industrial zones, where actually Jewish brain and Palestinian labor and Palestinian brain, coming to work together, Isaac and Ishmael come and work together, in those industrial zones, and give them priority, to market their product. And this has the potential of becoming actually a very strong economy, because the Arab Gulf countries, they have the money, they have the resources, they have the connections, and to give like the West Bank priority, they can advance the economy in a way that nobody expected. And by the way, Mahmoud Abbas cannot prevent Palestinian workforce from traveling to the West Bank into industrial zones created by Arab countries, But what I would like to see, my dream, to see young brains coming from Tel Aviv to work together, with Palestinian young people to create together, to build together, to join effort, to join ideas, energies, everything. And then there will be love stories and there will be amazing things happening. This what could establish something. So do I care about if Mahmoud Abbas agree or not? I don't see, like right now, that Israel and Arab world coming together. They should cut the middleman actually and reduce his role in the play. If he insists to stay a stumbling block in the way of the Palestinian generation, then we should go directly to the Palestinian people, build universities, build economy, whether Mahmoud Abbas like it or not. We can definitely go around him.
Great, thank you so much for answering that one. So the last one I want to ask relates back to why we're here with you today. So Rimon is a movement that is aiming to transform Israel education. So if there's one lesson that you could pass on to all of us, most of us being students, not entirely, but for the most part, we are students, what is one lesson you want to pass on to us? And maybe going further, what is it you want us to know about Palestinians and the Palestinian national movement that we can carry forward onto our campuses in our activism and our education?
Okay. Look, very important, as much as I love Israel, and we share common ground here, and I love you guys, you're amazing, and you inspire me. I'd like for you not to be limited to one political view, because Zionism is something, but I want you to be like global. I want you to be at the level of intelligence that actually sees the bigger picture at all time. You can push certain agendas and believe in something and have a certain belief. You're still young, and you need to believe in something. You need to have a purpose and agenda. That's fine. It's legitimate. Nobody can take that right from you. But eventually, you will transcend those barriers, because you will realize that actually what made Israel a great nation is not just a small political view or a narrow view of seeing the globe and of seeing the other nations. It's actually the broad view of praying for all nations and the peace of the world. This is the Jewish prayer. And this is the Jewish spirit, that does not seek revenge and seeks progress and evolution and growth and purity and peace. This is the Jewish soul. And of course, today you can have your Zionist mask or whatever, or face or attitude or whatever it is, it's life. And it's good to be involved in something, but always don't forget the soul, the soul of your people, your own soul, and always be beyond politics. This is my personal sharing, you know, that I don't even allow myself, you know, I can defend, you know, Israel and all that, but I will not even reduce myself to just any agendas. But again, I said it's legitimate, you know, it's legitimate. This is who you are. This is your identity for the moment, but always know that you will transcend those identities, you know, and you look back and you will laugh eventually. So be as strong as you want, you know, to achieve your goals and manifest your dreams and defend your people. It's righteous, it's beautiful. But most importantly, don't lose yourself.
Thank you so much for that. That was a really powerful statement to close off. I think that is really important today to a polarized world. So I really appreciate that. And again, for you coming out here to talk to us at an early hour. So is there anything you want to say to close off?
I think this is it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Mosab. Again, we really appreciate you coming out here. You've reached very far, all corners of the world. So we really appreciate that as well. You have an incredible story. I hope that you're able to keep sharing it farther and farther. And again, thank you to the Ramon Movement. Everyone follow them on Instagram. It's Ramon_movement. Just to pay attention, look out for any future webinars. So thank you to everyone for coming out to join us. And again, Mosab, thank you so, so much for your time. We all appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.